Great job, Vicențiu Ciorbaru, joining live from downstairs in Grankulla, Finland. So,
everyone.
Yeah, I'd like to get the basics straight first. So S3, if you look it up, it says it's a Amazon simple storage service. But from your perspective or the perspective of MariaDB, it's a format, or rather a protocol with which one can access data. Is that right?
Yes, so S3 is a way to get your data into the cloud, or not necessarily into the cloud, but to a server that speaks the S3 protocol.
And if I wish to, I can create such a server on my own local host.
Yes, there are implementations of S3. You can take one and use it as your own. And it's
so. But the basic question here is why? Okay, I can see why on the cloud, but is it just because of the cloud? You're constantly stressing that this doesn't have to be on the cloud. Well, why would I use it if it were not for the cloud?
Well, it's a very popular format, and you have lots of tools that can speak S3. We even had a talk from yesterday about TileDB, and TileDB can work with S3. So it's a very good, let's say, data exchange format for very large amounts of data.
Format or protocol?
Protocol.
So let's say I'm then using it on localhost. Doesn't it have, if I go through an extra protocol that is understandable across the web and comparing that to the storage engine API, which is very, very internal to the server, isn't there a large performance penalty?
There is a performance overhead, especially when you go to a faraway server that's not necessarily on your own network, but somewhere in the cloud. But the way we did it with S3 is that you get the data once, and then it's in the buffer cache. So follow-up queries are going to be much faster. And I even showed that during the presentation.
So the use case here for S3 is it archival or archival primarily, but also other things? So what's the use case?
So the use case is you have data that you don't want to access all the time, but you still want to be able to access it relatively quickly, like millisecond access. It's not, you're not going to do trading on it, but it's something that you want to have available. So,
and it's read only, not read and write, or it's sort of write once, I suppose.
Well, the S3 protocol lets you write stuff all the time. The way MariaDB S3 storage engine works is once you put the data into S3, the table becomes read-only, so you cannot add more data. If you want to add more data, you have to move it back, and then you write it as part of an InnoDB storage engine or ARIA, and then you put it back into S3. And there was a question on Zulip about partitions. So you can do the same just with individual partitions.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. How do you compare S3 to partitions?
Sorry, can you repeat?
How do you compare S3 to partitions as a way to partition data?
Well,
I mean, do you use, is there a use case where you could equally well use partitioning and S3?
Well, you can use partitioning with S3, but partitioning splits the data logically, whilst S3 puts it somewhere else.
Yeah, so but I suppose I can use S3 in such a way that I write continuously the next month's data and it's somehow concatenated with the previous month's data. If I use it for archival, usual archival method is to use to archive it by time, isn't it?
So you'd have to move it every month individually, if I get your question right.
Yeah. So you were talking now about partitioning. What about replication? Does it work with replication?
So replication works with S3. Like I've said in my talk, there are different setups. You can have one S3 provider for each server, or the same S3 provider for both servers, or all of the replicas. If you're using the same provider for all replicas. There are a few gotchas, so you need to be careful. The storage engine is still in alpha. It's progressing. We had some problems. Soon it's going to be gamma. But the thing to keep in mind is if a slave is lagging behind such that it didn't even see when the initial table was created, when the master is going to execute the moving of data to S3, because this slave has S3 discovery enabled, it will suddenly see that S3 table, and when it meets the create table statement from before, it's going to say, okay, this table already exists. I give up. This is not right.
It doesn't give up.
Okay.
Do you get extra comments by the creator of the S3 engine there in the background?
Yes, the creator of the S3 engine says the slave does not fully give up, but it's not something you want to encounter. So you need to be careful.
Okay, so I'm now excited to test this. And how should I test it as easily as possible? Should I buy some service off the cloud? Should I test it on my local host? How do I test this to get going?
I think getting the Amazon free tier is the fastest way. There's just a couple of clicks to get your account going. And then you get the security keys, create the bucket. I didn't go in my tutorial through all these steps, but it's not really hard. So I would suggest Amazon S3 for immediate get going. We're going to have some additions into MariaDB so you can test it locally. They're not there yet, but we're going to have them very soon in the next release.
So what else do I need to know about this? I mean, you now provided in your presentation good tips on how to get going. And you also said, hey, it's still not yet production level. When will it be production level?
Well, there are customers already using it in production from what I've heard. I guess we expect the community to give us more feedback if they're happy with how stable the storage engine is. From what I've heard, so far it's going well, but it's we decide when we make it stable based on the number of bugs we encounter for the storage engine. And
the stability of the engine is a separate issue from the stability of its mother release. So it yes. can become stable within 10.5, although 10.5 already is stable, but you say that S3 will be separately declared stable.
Yes, that is true. Yeah.
So we should look forward to one particular 10.5 release, and in the release note of that 10.5 release, it says S3 is now a production level.
Yes, that is true. And that's the nice part about storage engines. We can you can get them as soon as they're ready.
You can get the storage engines as soon as they're ready. So anything else I need to know if I test using your, if I get a test account, if I test it according to your script, and if I follow the announcements, that's all I need to do in order to get going with S3 for archival purposes, right?
Yes, MariaDB is also configured with sane defaults, so it should work pretty well out of the box. There are a few switches that I talk about during my talk. You probably don't ever have to touch, especially the block sizes. We've optimized them for what we're supposed to be Amazon's S3's best performing setting. But have a look at the documentation. We've documented everything about S3 there. And if you find anything that is not necessarily 100% correct, make sure to let us know.
And how do I let you know?
So you can either ping us on Zulip, preferably create a Jira issue if you think something is really wrong. Or the nice part about the documentation is that you can edit it yourself. So if you see something wrong there, you can just go and change it yourself.
And that's the knowledge base, I suppose.
Yes. Or you can even put a comment on the knowledge base. That also works.
Great. Any concluding words on S3 by you or the creator of S3?
So we actually have Monty here. Let's see if he has a few final words.
Hi, I don't know if you can see me. I know you can see me.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So excellent, Vicențiu. So you got almost everything right. You missed one part about the primary use of S3 especially for the customer for which I created it. It was cheaper storage. On S3 is about 1/3 cost, at least for that customer, of their storage, and they had wanted to store terabytes of data that doesn't touch. Then S3 is the perfect solution. And for big customers with really, really big data, the only parameter they had to change is greatly increase the buffer that is unique for S3. So that's basically
great concluding words. So thank you both, Vicențiu and Monty. Now we know about also the reason to use S3 in the form of cheap storage. Thank you both.